Good morning. My name is Dr. Larry Force, and I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College. And myself and colleague Dr. Jeff Kahana were directors of our Center on Aging and Disability at Mount St. Mary. Every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, we come together to have a discussion and an exchange about the ProActive Caring Program. In fact, we've even called this the ProActive Caring Program School Exchange. The idea is that when things turned for us in many ways, as far as the quarantine, we were making plans prior to that to go out through the state and continue to do our train-the-trainer programs. And one of the things that happened is that we realized that we weren't going to have access to large auditoriums. So in informal conversation with Peggy Pisano as the school psychologist advocate and Lisa Nathan as the parent advocate and meditator, we started an informal discussion, which now has turned into a weekly exchange. This program, the ProActive Caring Program, is funded by the New York State Developmental Disability Planning Council. And the theme of the program is to go out throughout the state of New York and to engage families that have family members with some type of disability, intellectual disability in this particular case, and to be able to expose them to a mindfulness-based training resource or as a tool. And it's been a wonderful experience. DDPC has been unbelievably supportive of our efforts from day one. And it's a wonderful partnership, and we feel honored to have been chosen to take the lead in this. We know that what we're doing matters. And how do we know that? From listening to people, from receiving emails, not only individuals and families, but also agencies. I've had 2 agencies contact me and ask me if it's okay if they use the work that Peggy and Lisa are doing as in-service training. Absolutely. I've had one county municipality contact me and ask me if they could put the material up on their county website. Absolutely. Because our idea was to develop a sense of presence and support for families as we're all transitioning in this new world. So today's focus is, the topic is on promoting good communication skills in a mindful way. And Peggy and Lisa, a tremendous partnership and friendship that's evolved. And what they bring to the table are different perspectives of how to go about capturing, those themes. And the focus today is on good communication skills. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to turn it over to Lisa and Peggy. And I think, Peggy, you're going to take the lead.
Hello. So today's topic is promoting good communication skills. And when I was looking into the topic, the research talks pretty specifically about effective communication. And basically, I think most people feel that communication is sort of an easy task. However, it's not always as simple as we think. Effective communication allows for the exchange of ideas and thoughts back and forth between the person who is speaking, the communicator in this case, and the person who is receiving the message, or the receiver. And so to understand the message, both things have to happen. Good communication is complex, and it's comprised of both expressive communication and receptive communication. So expressive is exactly what you might think, which is expressing yourself, saying what you think, giving your thoughts to someone else. Receptive communication is the ability to receive that information and understand it. So in order for good communication to occur, both things have to happen. And that's not always the case when people speak with each other. People generally are hardwired, if you will, to communicate and connect with each other. And verbal communication is a way to make that sort of happen. Good communication can increase, the research shows that good communication can increase social skills, obviously, test scores for students in schools, job opportunities, because it's important that we be able to convey our message to others and have that message received by someone else. Conversely, poor communication, or communication that's not as effective, can lead to a high range of difficulties, including, but not always, social problems, anger, frustration, because we're not getting our point across, difficulty, excuse me, in relationships, and so on and so forth. So you can see that exchange is important and relevant, and then the lack of exchange is detrimental to perhaps future and interactions with others. So communication occurs very early on in a person's life, even before we can use verbal language to communicate. So you might have a toddler or an infant who is crying and whining. And so as a parent or a caregiver, you kind of try to develop a skill of understanding what that means. Also, you might have a toddler who's tantruming and carrying on in a story. I know Lisa told a story last week about when her child was having a tantrum in the store. So that means something. It might not mean what the parent wants it to mean, and you may not give in to that, but for the child, that's a way of communicating, that tantruming, that acting out, that, yelling and so on. Later in life, teenagers, preteens, young adults, they do things like storm off, run into their room, become frustrated by whatever their parent or caregiver is communicating with them that they perhaps don't like, and they communicate by closing off or moving away. For people with developmental disabilities or disabilities in specifically, there's not always verbal communication. And in that case, there are, sort of idiosyncratic ways of communicating what they want and need. In some cases, there's gestures, there's movements, there's even behavioral things, tantrums, and it behooves the caregiver then to kind of develop that understanding of what the person's trying to convey, and utilizing those things to increase the communication between them, so that the parent or caregiver understands that this gesture or this movement sometimes means this, and so that it kind of has an exchange between the receiver and the giver. So in general, communication is not always verbal, and a lot of times it's not verbal even for people who do use language, as a verbal exchange. So good communication skills, there are strategies for increasing good communication skills, and the research shows that that kind of thing should be started very early on, so that children, that's my dog again, that children can learn those strategies with their parents. So some of the things that the research showed was, when you're trying to communicate with someone, make sure you have that person's attention. Give them eye contact so that the giver and the receiver understand, I'm going to have to stop you in a minute, understand that this is an exchange going on. As a parent, you should be a good role model. And I think that we've spoken about this in varied instances over the course of these little talks, that being the role model for the behavior that you want your child or person to develop is the best strategy. I'm going to mute myself for a second and see if I can get this under control. Hang on.
While you're doing that, I just want to tell a really short story. When my son, who's developmentally disabled, when he was really young and was at his neurologist, the doctor in the Bronx, and she was trying to get information from him, and we were, talking about, she had some toys set up for him, and I learned something really, really valuable. He couldn't say what he wanted. His expressive communication is very poor, but when she told me, touch the one you want. And he was able to do that. And I have done that for him from now. He's 19 years old, and I still use that method, and it's very, very effective. Anyway, so I just want to kind of throw that in there.
Thanks. And that was one of the other strategies, sort of demonstrate what you need to communicate for people whose, communication skills are somewhat more limited. Demonstrate it, move to the object, ask the child, is this what you want? Show it to them. Try to send a very clear message to children, and especially children and children with disabilities, a short message that doesn't include a lot of idioms and idiosyncratic kind of language, because they don't understand. For example, getting caught with your pants down. If children are very literal, so they don't understand what that necessarily means. So limit those kinds of things. Make sure your tone of your message is congruent with what you mean to say. So if you are smiling, but you're saying something sort of negative, then your child's going to get a mixed message. If you're also, yelling, but, you have a happy face on, then again, they don't have a message that the verbal exchange and the nonverbal exchange meet each other. And for kids with disabilities specifically, especially kids perhaps on the spectrum, they don't read those facial messages very well. So if we try to have our face look like what we want to convey, I think that's an important message. When you want to make sure that someone clearly understood your message, ask for feedback from the conversation. Or if you're the receiver of the message, then, kind of ask clarifying questions so that everybody understands that what the message was and how it was conveyed. Indicate that you are paying attention to the message by nodding and smiling and kind of agreeing along the way, so that, again, the person who's expressing themselves is sure that the other person is receiving the message clearly. Wait for the person to, and this is hard for children especially, but wait for the person to finish their message before you interrupt. And kids do that. You're on the phone and you're talking to someone and they're tugging at you or they're interrupting. So there's ways of teaching that, maybe not right at that moment, but certainly waiting for, teaching children to wait for their appropriate time to interject in the conversation. Also with children, using appropriate tone and volume is important. So oftentimes in elementary school, you'll hear teachers say things like, let's use our inside voice, or this is a playground voice, so that kids understand that in the home or in the church or whatever environment we're in, there's a different volume that's necessary versus the volume that we use outside when we're playing with our friends. And also, when you're at a higher level, but paraphrasing, the receiver can paraphrase what the expressor is meaning to say so that they can clarify. It's a way of understanding, did I get that message correctly? For young children and older children, there are some games. And when we did some research, there's a whole myriad of possibilities of games and things that you can play with your children to increase communication. One of the things that the research talked about was when children have more empathy, then they generally can communicate better. So trying to instill that empathy in children is also important. But one of the games that I thought was a pretty interesting thing that a couple of the researchers showed was that there was a game called Guess the Object. And so the essence of the game is a child has an object in a box or, somewhere, but they can't look at it. But they have to describe to others, could be their parents, could be their siblings, and this is a game that we could all play at home since we are all home. They have to describe what that object is without naming the object, and the other people are guessing to see what it is. So you're increasing the child's ability to name things and understand things and describe those things for other people, so that that communication exists and the child is learning to be specific and concrete about what they're hoping to say. Another game, which we probably all played when we were young, was show and tell. And you can do that at home as well. Pick something or the child picks something that they really like or that they understand, and they have to be able to describe it to their family members. And that's something you could do at the dinner table, after dinner, as game night, where everybody picks an object and then you talk about what it is. And so that everybody kind of learns to describe and understand the object. Another one was picture telling. So a child gets a picture and they have to tell a story about that picture. And it's a story that they can make up. And then you're giving a message and the people are receiving the message about a story that the child is interested in, or a story that the child created. have a child work with a project at home. You know, could be an arts and crafts, could be something, but something that they have to do with others, so that maybe there are directions, or maybe they have to tell the other person, okay, we're going to, you know, color it this way, or we're going to use these tasks. And so that all those things increase conversation and communication. One of the other things, what I used to like to play this when I was a child, but did you ever play the game telephone, where there's a person who gives the message, and then at the end somebody else is, you know, repeating what they heard. And so those are ways of listening intently and then repeating a message that perhaps the expressor or the sender meant to say. And then at the end, you see, in fact, that was the correct message. So those are some strategies and some games that can be used with children to increase communication skills. There are other things that for older people and older adults that could be utilized as well. But I think the bottom line is that increasing communication is important, and as best possible, starting early and working pretty diligently throughout the day, not as a sitting in a school task, but just throughout the pulse of the day, we can increase and promote good communication. So
and before Lisa presents her perspective, you know, the points that you make, I really like, especially the fact that you reference something about teaching empathy. You know, and some people have this belief that empathy is not a teachable skill, but in fact, it really can be. And it can be through, as you indicate, through modeling and connecting words with actions. You know, you're not sending a mixed message. You're not, you don't have a frown on your face and saying something happy, or saying something happy and having a frown. You know, it has to be parallel. They have to be connected. So I think the behavioral perspective, you know, you really hit it out of the park there about the fact of these are the steps that people can take. And it's not a talking head presentation. You can wrap it around games and activities and things that, you know, are engaging. So that's I think that's one of the major messages that for parents is the fact that there are behavioral strategies that can be, excuse me, that can be employed. So thanks. Lisa?
All right, thanks, Peggy. Hi, everybody. And I couldn't agree more. Communication is very, very complicated. And so some thoughts. When we're in a conversation with somebody, do we have preconceived notions in our mind? Are we injecting our own intentions and assumptions? And are we creating an idea in our mind thinking that we know what the other person feels, or that we think we know what they really mean? Are we adding in extra emotions and feelings and reacting to that? Are we, in fact, reacting to things we made up in our own mind in a conversation? So have you ever had the experience before talking to someone where you create the whole conversation in your mind, and by the time you actually have the conversation, you're reacting to the made up thoughts that never even happened? In essence, you pump up your own emotions, and the other person, when you actually are having the conversation, ends up being on the receiving end of a conversation that they were never even a part of. So when you're in a conversation, where are you? Just as you can be lost in thought while walking or driving, you can be lost in thought during a conversation. You can be disconnected and disengaged from the other person. Or in a conversation, are you thinking about your own agenda and what you want to say? Do you already formulate a response without really listening to what the other person is saying? So what is mindful communication? All right, here's just a few things. Clearing your head before you start a conversation. Mindful listening, listening to what the other person is saying, let them finish speaking. Non-judgmental listening, no right or wrong, just different perceptions. I understand, I see what you mean, respecting the other person's experience. Trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. being totally there and totally present in the conversation, and we'll talk more about that. Letting go of results and expectations, not having a fixed result in mind for the conversation. And don't harm. Words have energy. Don't make assumptions if you don't understand something. Ask for clarification. Stay curious. Check in with your body and mind. And care. We don't pay attention to things we don't care about. And we don't care about things that we don't pay attention to. So how can we be present to care about the other person in the conversation? Because without presence, we're checked out. When we approach a dialogue with curiosity and care, we're willing and able to listen. And that opens the door to more connection and understanding. And like Peggy said, it takes practice. And what Larry said about empathy, it takes practice. So, presence. Hang on a second, throw my notes up here. So showing up as fully and completely as possible, and I talked about that. And that's certainly where meditation can help. Attention. Being aware of our attention, being aware of our emotions, feelings, and needs. Hang on, I'm sorry. I messed up my notes here. Okay, take a breath. Let me restart that. Okay, we talked about presence. Intention. Are our words and actions in sync? And Peggy, you mentioned this. Are the words and our body language saying the same thing? Are we intentionally staying present, curious, and caring? Or are we on an automatic, relying on unconscious, habitual thought patterns? Attention. Being aware of our emotions, feelings, and needs, and supporting our ability to choose consciously how we participate in a conversation. The more awareness we have, the more choices we have in how to proceed. Are we really listening, or are we formulating the perfect response in our minds before the other person even finishes speaking? And the all-important pause. And I know this is like becoming a recurring theme. And Larry, you put this in my head. Meditation creates behavioral change on a physiological level and encourages more rational behavior and weakens others' behavior that drives fear and irrational emotional responses. So meditation makes it easier to let go of negative responses and decreases reactivity. It lets you become more aware if you're having a knee-jerk reaction to something being said or you're responding genuinely. So, before we go into a meditation, I just want to share my experience. So when I started meditating, it was maybe just a few months. Hold on a second. Sorry, my brother was on the phone. I just wanted to. So my experience, so I've been meditating maybe a few months. And one of the first things I noticed was my difference in my communication. So previously, I often felt really self-conscious and worried what the other person was thinking of me, being self-judgmental, and so stuck in my swirling thoughts that I wasn't really hearing what the other person was saying. I was so worried about whether I would be saying the right thing that I was more wrapped up in my own thoughts than listening to the actual conversation at hand. So I started to notice once my mind started to clear and get calm, that I could hear more clearly. And I was much more able to create a clearer response. It was really revelatory. I definitely became a much better listener and trusted my voice more. And my intuition. And meditation gives you the space, kind of like that decluttering your closet feeling that can feel really good. So let's As a meditation, let's just take a few minutes to clear ourselves. And I'm just going to take you on a really short, kind of little meditation, communication, thinking journey. Okay, we know how to take a few deep breaths to relax our nervous system, to connect to our body, to bring our thoughts down into our body and make that mind-body connection, to relax ourselves a little bit. Okay. So how do you talk to yourself, which is the essence of beginning a good communication process? In the thousands of thoughts that we have every day, which we all do, what do you tell yourself? Are your thoughts negative, positive, loving, admonishing, patient, or impatient? Do you have a recurring loop, a recurring dialogue loop that you play over and over and over again? When we're in communication, when we're in our minds, there's something called monkey mind in the meditation world. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Do you have thoughts bouncing all over the place? Like you can imagine monkeys, 1,000 monkeys in a grove, running and jumping all over the place. Is that what your mind is like? You know, we have thoughts, and not all thoughts are bad. We have good thoughts and bad thoughts, but the point is, I'm sorry, my brother is having a conversation over there and I'm distracted. I'm really sorry. The point in meditation is not to stop our thoughts, because we can't stop our thoughts. The point is to where we place our attention and creating awareness and a small space between those thoughts. It's creating the micropause. It's all about where you'll place your attention and creating that space and awareness. So if we abstain from negative speech patterns in our thoughts and create kinder, more loving, and patient speech, that will be reflected in our inner dialogue. And when our inner dialogue is nourishing, what we say and do is an extension of that. So let's just take one moment to say that we're going to try in 60 seconds, in 1 minute, to be aware of what thoughts we have and try to take it back to something kinder, because we're most always hardest on ourselves. So if we can create that good dialogue and that kind, compassionate thought patterns in ourselves, and that good communication, we can take that out to others around us. Okay. Thank you.
So I just want to say that one of the hallmarks of our approach is that we never set this up as a town hall. So that people, because it's artificial to assume that families would be able to pull up to a discussion on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. The power of our approach is the fact that we capture this, we send it out through our distribution list, Our collaborating agencies send it out through their distribution list, and our reach has been far and wide, both locally, on the state level, and also nationally. There have been 2 national organizations that have reached out indicating they're on our mailing list and they want to know more about what we're doing and how we're doing it, because of the fact that we're onto something. Not only the message that the 2 of you bring to the table, but the way that we're going about doing it. So here we are talking about meditation, and there's a barking dog. Here we are talking about meditation, and there's a talking brother. That's real. That's the reality of the worlds that we're living in. You know, and the fact of, you know, and Jeffrey and I have talked a lot about this idea of maybe we need to come up with another word, you know, or a word in front of meditation, micro meditation, micro pause, you know, because of the fact that there's zero way that what we're promoting is somebody sitting for 45 minutes in a lotus position. That would be wonderful. But in the reality of the worlds that we're living in these particular times, it's not going to happen. But the idea of being able to direct somebody back to their breath. You know, in my private practice, I use clinical hypnotherapy. I've had a number of times where I've been using this and everything is calm and there's some background music and the person's enjoying it. And the next thing you know, a phone goes off. So instead of stopping and coming back, one of the things that I emphasize is just focus on your breathing. When you focus on your breathing, the outside noise diminishes. So even though that you thought it was a distraction, in fact, it was an added value, because of the fact that what you're demonstrating and what we've received is that people love the fact that the way that we're presenting this is so natural. You know, you're not, you know, you don't come onto this Zoom call and you're sitting in some type of yoga studio with a burning candle. You know, the first week, you know, you had to move yourself, you know, to another part of your house. You know, Peggy, I think, you know, probably has about 150 dog biscuits by her side right now, you know, trying to contain, you know, the dog. But that's the reality of it. But I think the message today was very clear, that there are strategies, both behavioral and practice, that can be used in order to enhance and increase communication skills. So bravo to both of you. So any closing remarks from either one of you?
I think I just wanted to say that there's such an intersection between, you know, sort of psychology and the research that I do and then what Lisa does. And it seems to me that we keep redoing some of the previous themes. And I think that's because there's an intersection between those themes, like, for example, increasing empathy and understanding and good communication skills. And so it just seems to me that things are being tied together. And obviously we're all human. And so everything that we do, every thought that we have, every feeling that we can express, you know, comes out in many different ways, through communication, through frustration, through meditation. So, you know, it just seems to me that more and more some of the things that we're doing are just very interconnected.
That's true.
It's very, very, very true. And we had this conversation, Larry. You said something, and I'll mention it here. You know, once you start to notice, once you become a little bit more aware, that grows. So once you become aware of something, you become aware of your reactivity. It builds on itself. So that's where this grows. In the beginning, it may not seem like very much, but it slowly, slowly grows. You just need to have patience and practice. And Peggy, I totally, totally agree. I feel like we're building on skills from each session to the next. It's all connected. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you, both of you. And we will see everyone again next week. All right. Be well and have a safe week. Thank you so much.